Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is Pop Culture Warrior. I am CQ. I am super excited for tonight's guest. We got a really, really great one. My guest tonight has been writing for television since 1996. His many credits include Just Shoot Me, King of the Hill, Beavis and Butthead, Wilfred, Out of Practice, Rules of Engagement, Lopez, and most recently Tacoma FD. He's also served as an executive producer and showrunner on multiple shows. If you're interested in getting into the screenwriting business or just general storytelling advice, you can check out his online course on his website or follow his hilarious and insightful social media accounts pretty much anywhere: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, even TikTok. So guys, please welcome the incredible Michael Jamin. Hey.
Thank you.
I gotta do like a round of applause thing. One day I'm gonna have a button just so yay! Welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh man, you have no idea how excited I am. I'm to give you a little bit of understanding is that I started this whole podcast. I started this whole show because it's not even a podcast anymore. Live stream, talk show, entertainment, variety show. Because I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy that loves TV, loves movies, loves entertainment. And I'm fascinated not just by, the actors, who are incredible and portray these amazing characters, but I'm fascinated by the direction, the production, the writing of it. We've talked to stuntmen, we've talked to producers and writers and all types of people. And it is mind blowing the level of effort that goes behind some of our favorite shows or least favorite shows. So this is my opportunity to kind of geek out over the behind the scenes of everything and mine for all the gold out there and obviously take the audience with me, which everybody's saying hi, by the way. Okay. First question, same as always for everyone that comes on the show. What is your connection to the military in general?
Well, I'm sure your entire audience has heard of Private First Class Jerry Jamin. There's got to be a statue somewhere. So my dad, he served, and my uncle served. This is back in the '60s. That's my connection. And of course, and I have my father-in-law's old army jacket, which I wear, and I look like a psychopath when I walk around town with that. You don't mess with someone wearing a jacket like that.
Yeah, is it the old? Is it the OD green, all green, or is it like the fatigued camouflage?
Yeah, no, it's all green, but it's like Taxi Driver. It's that kind of it's size, and it's like a raincoat thing that I wear, but it doesn't rain here much. But yeah, people leave me alone when I wear that. I like that.
All right, right on. Well, thank them. We thank them for their service, and that's a great connection. I mean, do you was that part of growing up? Did you hear stories or things like that, or it was kind of on the fringe?
No, going to bed, it was all my father's telling me stories like what happened in the army. He was getting yelled at by his drill sergeant. All his stories. You would have thought my father loved basic training. Like he hated it, but when you listen to his stories, this is the best time. He has nothing but fond stories, but I think he hated every minute of it.
Yeah, you've just summed up the military experience in general. It's literally we just bitched the whole time, and then afterwards you go, really miss those times. Those are good times. And we can get into a whole side conversation of why I don't think there's a lot of great entertainment out there that captures the true experience of the military, life. But I mean, that's a whole separate, convoluted, complicated why.
You need more writers, people like yourself who get out of the military, write, because that's what you guys know, whoever's you're listening to. If obviously you did, you served, write about it, man. Your experiences, the stories that you guys have are better than anything we can make up.
That is true. And I'm a big, during this show, we've also touched a lot on mental health and overcoming things like PTSD and TBI and these things. And one thing that I always recommend to people is dabbling in the arts, whether you are artistic in the sense of you like to draw or you're artistic in the sense you like to write poetry, whatever it is. It's such a great outlet for a lot of that emotional turmoil and the things. But out of that also, I know some incredible service members, men, women, who went on to I have a good friend who's written for off Broadway. She's taken her experiences and put them on paper and won those local festivals and writing competitions and things like that. So it's such a cool thing. And I couldn't agree with you more that those experiences are amazing in it, and obviously getting it out is very cathartic as well.
I also think that like people who serve, like, I guess I wish you guys would wear something more that so we know, because I think we all like, you know, I want to, that it's such an interest. I want to hear about that. I want to talk to you about your experience. Like, geez, you guys, you know, I mean, heroes is like, you know, whatever, it's overused, but
sure,
so there's nothing more noble to serve than to serve your country. And geez, it's dangerous, and they don't pay you enough. I know that. So I mean, but if you had some kind of, I don't know, badge that was obvious or something, you don't have to carry a flag, just something a little more.
Right. Like a pin or something, you know, like a button.
Yeah, a button. Say, hey man, look what I did. Then I'm like, I'd want to talk more about you. You know?
Right. They gotta, you know, they gotta corral us in a little area so everybody can, like a zoo. They can just, they can just come and visit. Okay, we've gone way off tangent here. Welcome to the show. So, so I did a little bit of digging, and I read somewhere that your first job in Hollywood was serving frozen yogurt at a place called Humphrey Yogurt.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. That was that was rough. I mean, you had, you know, and that was literally in Beverly Hills, but it wasn't like I wouldn't say it's my first job in Hollywood just because it was Humphrey Yogurt. It was one of my first jobs working in Hollywood.
Right. Yeah. So where do you come from originally? Where was your roots in LA, or do you come from somewhere else in the country?
I grew up in New York, and then after college, I moved out to LA to try to make it as a TV writer.
I mean, are we talking? Because I'm from New York, but when I say that, I mean New York City. So
yeah, I'm half hour north of the city.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always find that it's great when people are like, yeah, I'm from New York. Where? Buffalo. Like, no, you're not from New York.
No. I say that because my dad worked in the city. We used to go to the city, you know, but I was about a half-hour train ride.
Sure. Why LA? I mean, obviously New York has a very big scene as far as, I mean, I get it. If you're trying to get into making script writing and making shows, LA is kind of the place for that. But was there ever a thought that, oh, maybe I can crack my teeth in New York City?
I remember asking one of the first people I knew was like, I knew through a friend of a friend, like I knew an agent, and I asked her that question: do I have to move to LA? Because I wanted to stay in New York. She goes, nope, you have to go to LA. And I was like, there's no choice. If you want to work in TV, you have to go to LA. There is some production that's done in New York, but the writing is almost always done out here. And okay, so maybe you can you can get a couple of jobs in New York, but you can't put together a career in New York. It's really hard. Right. It's really hard to do that.
Yeah, because, you know, you hear a lot about how, or maybe the typical person doesn't, I do, you know, a lot of stuff is shot in Vancouver. A lot of stuff is shot in Atlanta, right? Because of all the tax breaks and things. Right. But even in those situations, is the majority of the writing being done in LA and then just the shooting of it in those places?
Yeah. Like Handmaid's Tale, I believe they write that here. Same thing with Breaking Bad. I believe they wrote that here in the valley somewhere, and they shot that in New Mexico. So
yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. So as I understand it, you kind of started out because a retired sitcom writer was offering screenwriting classes, and so he's you were obviously already interested in doing it. But that's where, you know, your writing got honed and kind of doors got open for you.
Well, I wanted to learn not from a professional teacher. I wanted to learn from someone who had done it. I got real lucky. I found this guy. This is before the internet. Like, how do you find this guy? But I moved out here, and then in circles and talking to people, this guy's name came up. And so, yeah, he wrote on like the original Twilight Zone, Andy Griffith Show, Get Smart, like all my favorite shows from that era he wrote on. And then he was just retired now, and he taught classes like in his dining room on the weekends. And like that's who I wanted to learn from, someone who had done because that's the job I want. I wanted to be a sitcom writer.
Sure. Yeah. You don't want to learn from I like that. You don't want to learn from a teacher. You want to learn from a doer, a guy who's been there and done that. Makes sense. Yeah. Makes total sense. And guys in the chats, lots of comments, but if you guys have questions for Michael Jamin, throw them in the chats. We'll get them answered as we continue on. So as I was looking, the first credit I could find for you was 1995, an episode of Lois and Clark: New Adventures of Superman.
Right.
How did that become a reality? Because I mean, that was a pretty big show while it was on. I mean, that's a big place to get a start.
Yeah. I was an assistant. I broke in as an assistant to these two writers, executive producers, and they were doing a different show. But I stayed in touch with them. I worked for them for maybe a year or two, and I answered their phone and I got them lunch. I wasn't even good at that. But they were nice to me. And then they took over. They ran Lois and Clark, and I asked. I had a writing partner then. I still do. I said, "Can we pitch you an episode?" And so they said, sure. That's like a big deal to be able to pitch an episode. And they let us pitch, and they bought one. We brought 5 ideas. They bought one, and then we wrote it. And that was like that's a big deal. Your first one is a big deal.
Yeah. And can you, again, I know a little bit, but for the general audience, can you explain the idea of pitching 5 episodes and then they buy one? Because I understand how big of a concept that is, but it might be lost on some people.
Well, with Superman, it was really hard because there's certain, they said, okay, come and pitch ideas. They said, you can't, nothing with kryptonite and nothing with, I can't remember what the term they used, but it was death traps. In other words, they heard a lot of ideas where if Superman landed on this plate and he flew off it, that would set off a bomb on the other side of the world and killing 100 people or whatever. And so they'd heard that idea a million times. So we couldn't do either of those two. And I remember talking with my partner, and he said, we're trying to think of ideas. He goes, that's Superman. He's such a damn goody two-shoe. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, it's hard to come up with stories because he's so perfect and he's such a goody two-shoe. And I was like, yeah. And that triggered something in me. I remember in the shower, I go, that's a good idea. Like, I had this idea, and then we worked on it together. But the idea basically came from, what if someone slapped him with a paternity suit, and that would really hurt his feelings because he's such a goody two. I would never have premarital sex because that's Superman. He wouldn't do that. And that became the idea that they bought because that's how that unlocked that. That's my partner saying that really unlocked the character for me.
Yeah, that's the idea of that is just so wild out of there. I love it.
Because it's darker. Superman really isn't. He's like, he's my least favorite superhero because he's so perfect.
I could not agree with you more. Like, as the character's iconic, lots of respect and credit. But man, you can't be a more perfect. And he's not human. That's the thing. He's not human. But you couldn't be a more perfect human. He doesn't have an impure thought in his body. It's like my God,
Right. Right.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's just a little too chiseled and perfect. I liked, and I think me personally, just growing up, I liked more of the Marvel characters. They were more flawed. They were, Iron Man's an alcoholic and Peter Parker's broke and always bad luck. And like all these characters are so flawed. They feel real. Versus these gods among men. Anyway, I digress. So yeah. Okay. So the other thing I want to touch on that you were talking about is the idea of a writing partner. Most people are going to say, okay, I'm a writer. I write the stuff, I sell it or I shoot it or whatever it is. What is for you? What does it mean to have that writing partner? What is that relationship like?
It's like a marriage. It's like, I've been working with him my whole career. So you're talking about close to 30 years. And we broke in together, basically. And we were teamed up we had the same agents. So we teamed up together as opposed to competing with each other. And we do everything together. Every single project we do together. And that's just it. With comedy, it's a little more important than drama, although there are drama teams. Because you don't know if it's funny until the guy sitting across you or the woman sitting across you laughs. And then you go, okay, that's funny. So I think it's a little more important with, for comedy.
Sure. No, I do stand up comedy. And one of the things is you have these ideas, you write these jokes and you're like, oh, that's a killer. And then you start talking with your comedy friends and they're like, dude, that's garbage. That's not funny at all. And you're like, oh yeah, I knew that. I was just testing to see if you still were funny. So, okay, great. Yeah. A couple months ago, we had on, Carter Bays, who co-created How I Met Your Mother, and talking to him about his writing partner and how they stay. It makes sense when you have that person that you trust, you've built a relationship that goes back and forth, and can be honest when you need them to be honest, and like not really worry about the whole hurt feelings thing. It pays off.
Yeah, ego goes out the window.
That's great. So from there, you start working on Just Shoot Me, which you did for about 4 years.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? Because I can't imagine, with all the characters and the David Spade and a lot of the people that were on that show, that must have been interesting to write for.
That was my real big break, because then I was on staff. The Superman was just a freelance episode. This was my first staff job, and I was doing a sitcom, which is what I wanted to do. That was like I was in heaven. We're in that comedy room. The writers' room was, to this day, one of the best I've ever worked with. In terms of the sheer talent. And I was intimidated because everyone was so funny. Oh, I'm talking about the writers. The actors were terrific. The actors were lovely. We got lucky because, sometimes an actor can be a diva, but everyone in that cast was just lovely, great people to work with, just friendly. And we had a reunion a couple of years ago. I mean, it was really a great experience. So. Oh,
that's awesome. That's what you want to hear. So I do have a question from the chat from Greg. He I guess there's a 2-part question. So the first one is, current show that would be on your bucket list to write for. So I guess if you could choose a show to write for, what show would it be? Well,
I'm currently writing a show called Tacoma FD. We're going to our 4th season. We start in a couple of weeks writing that. So I don't really want to say, like, I some shows that I love. I think Barry's fantastic. I watch a lot of dramas, which I really enjoy watching drama, but I don't want to be a drama writer. So I'm not sure if this is the best question for me to answer.
No, absolutely. Go for it.
A lot of shows that are fantastic, I would not want to write. Like comedy show, I would not want to write for, because I could tell that, I could just tell it'd be really a nightmare situation to work on a show like that. But yeah, I like a lot of dramas. Sorry, Greg.
No, it's a funny thing, and I've seen this happen before, where I was talking to a writer or a director or an actor, and I asked, "Oh, what would you like to be on?" And they go, "Oh, there's so many shows that I love, but I wouldn't want to be on it because I would bring the quality down." Like it's such self-deprecating that they're like, "Oh, I couldn't act with those actors, or I couldn't write with those writers, or whatever it was." I just, there's a great self-deprecation thing there. I think it was an actor. I want to say it was an actor. It was like, I can't compete with those guys. So the other question was, are you a fan of reboots? So I guess, obviously we live in an age where everything's getting resequeled and rebooted and refranchised and all these things. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I personally don't like them. I mean, I get why they do them. It's because they're much easier to market than a remake or a reboot. Like I'm just not a fan of it. So yeah, I mean, most writers want to create original stuff. They don't want to reimagine. I think most writers. So, but you got to go with it. I get why they do it. You got to pay the bills. And
well, there's the built-in fan base. I mean, there's like the nostalgia.
I mean, you'll screw that up. You write the next Star Wars episode, and people will hate you because you ruined the franchise. So, I don't think any writer really wants to go down that road.
How do they get this stuff? How do they get this stuff made if nobody wants to do it? I agree with you. I'm like, if they ask me,
because you open up a checkbook, and that's why. I mean, hey, listen, open the checkbook, and I forget this conversation ever happened. So,
you know what? Fair point. Because I'm the biggest Spider-Man fan. Like I've seen them all. I love them all. Favorite character. I have a million ideas of what a great Spider-Man story could be for a movie or show. But if they asked me to do it, I'd be like, no, God, no. I mean, I'm not a writer, but I would be terrified to with something you're so passionate about to be attached to it. That would terrify me. So there you go, Greg. Great question. More questions coming in. Keep asking questions, guys. Okay, so we talked about Just Shoot Me, which incredible. I'm so happy that it was a positive experience because there were some great people on that show. Then you went on, and you've done a lot of things. I'm just kind of pinpointing the things that I like here. King of the Hill. You got to. What was the transition like writing for live action and then switching gears and writing for animation?
Well, to be honest, when you think about it, Just Shoot Me was more of a cartoon than King of the Hill. Because King of the Hill was very real, very grounded.
Sure.
It almost didn't need to be animated. You could, there's very little about that show that, wasn't like no one's head blew up or anything. So it was about writing smaller stories and not being concerned with the number of sets, because you can go on, you could draw whatever you want. But if you know a story, if you understand story structure, it really doesn't matter whether you're writing a cartoon or animation show or live action, a single camera, multi-camera movie. It's all story is story. So, but I learned a ton on King of the Hill. I really learned about story, more about story structure working on King of the Hill than is on Just Shoot Me. And that's because I was a younger writer on Just Shoot Me, and I didn't really have to understand story as well. I just relied on the higher up writers.
Right, and I'm curious too, like, in a live action, in something like Just Shoot Me, is there more room for an actor, let's say, to improvise or ad lib kind of certain things, whereas animation, is it a little bit more like, hey, hit the words?
No, I mean, on Just Shoot Me, they stuck to the script. If an actor had a problem with a line, we would rewrite it, but it was always, they'd stick to the script. Or if a line didn't work on the floor, we would rewrite the line. So there wasn't a lot of ad libbing on Just Shoot Me. On other shows that I've done, sometimes we'll leave more room for ad libbing. When my partner and I did Maron, some parts were ad libbed on that show. So, but like when we write the script, we go, okay, it's okay if this part's ad libbed. It wasn't the whole thing, just parts of it.
Gotcha. And I'm curious too, because and forgive me, I don't recall, but was Just Shoot Me done in front of like the live studio audience, or so it was? Okay, yeah. So that's got to be a difference. As a writer, are you there on those, like, the shoot nights? Are you there in front of the audience? Because that's got to be.
Hi, I'm looking good. Yeah,
you got
and we're, yeah. I mean, that's shoot night. That's always exciting and fun. But after a long week, yeah.
Right. So I'm curious, because that's got to be a different type of conclusion to the writing effort, right? Because when you see it being performed almost as live theater versus like, I mean, are you part in the sound studio? Are you watching the guys for like King of the Hill? Were you watching them record lines, or was it just?
For the ones we wrote, I didn't direct any on King of the Hill, but other animation shows, animated, series I've directed the actors. But yeah, on a multi-camera show like Just Shoot Me, shot in front of a live audience, so there's no laugh track. Like, people are in the audience and they have microphones overhead, and we're recording their laughter and we're using those laughs. So it's not like it's canned or anything. And if a joke tanks on the floor, then you got to think of something on the spot and you do a quick rewrite. And you're always the audience is there, and like the actors are feeding off the energy, and the writers are hopefully, I remember one time we wrote an episode that did not go over well. I was like, oh my, it was like I was sweating the whole time because I could just tell the audience wasn't into it. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know how you do it. Because that's such a level of pressure where, we've written this thing, and then if it falls flat, and I mean, maybe it's not the actors, maybe it's not the writing. Maybe you just got a bad audience.
And that could happen. But yeah, it's weird. You're working on this thing for months or weeks at least, and then for it to not go over well. But, when then you watch it on the air and it actually turned out okay. Sometimes you could just tighten things up and it worked out fine. So.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. From Scott in the chats, do writers need to do their own research, or do they have resources in which there's a specialist to consult? For example, if you're writing a show about space travel, the mechanics of space engines or advanced tech needed to be somewhat reasonable or plausible.
Yeah, like I think on The Big Bang, they had the consultant there who a science guy who was I think the person was in the room the whole time. But for most shows that I work on, they were really character-y stuff. So if you need something specific, okay, so here's an example. I'm working on the show Tacoma FD. It takes place in the fire department. We have a guy on the show, a retired fireman. He sits in the room and we bounce stuff off him to make sure it's accurate, and he corrects us, and it's called the apparatus room, like stuff like that. So it sounds authentic.
The technical jargon. Yeah,
and it shouldn't sound like it's written by comedy writers. It should sound somewhat real.
Okay.
So sometimes you have a consultant, but for the most part, you can always research. You can go on Google and do some research, but I haven't written any space movies or anything. So, but if I did, I'd probably read a book, maybe.
A lot of people love Tacoma FD, by the way, myself included. I think it's a phenomenal show. You guys are doing awesome on that. We'll get to that.
Great.
From Kaz in the chats, he wants to know what's the story with the shoe over your shoulder.
Oh, this shoe?
Yeah.
It's not really a shoe, Kaz. It's just this is where they make a shoe on here. So the shoe is, I took this off a guy who has, the story belongs to the guy who's missing the foot. That he's got a better story for you. Okay.
There you go. It wasn't a shoe. From my view, it does look like a shoe too until you hold it up close, and then you're like, oh, okay, no, that's a wooden foot.
A wooden foot. Yeah, they make shoes on it.
All right, fantastic. Well, there you go. That answers that. Let's see. Okay, a lot of love of the shows. Okay, so from King of the Hill, which you did for about 5 years, came Out of Practice, Rules of Engagement, Wilfred. All phenomenal shows. And then it was a little bit after that you started kind of switching gears. You went from the writing to now becoming showrunners of a series. Yep. What's that trend? I'm curious because as a writer, when do you know that you're ready to make that switch, or is it just like, hey, we've got this thing, you want to run it?
It's a little bit of both, honestly. It's like, you're different levels of writer, and you work your way up, and you finally get to a point where it's either like you either go up or you don't work. So, it's like you better do something. So that's when we got an opportunity to run a show. So sometimes I'd say at this point in my career, about half the jobs I get are for running, and the other half are co-exec, which is like the second layer. And I'm perfectly happy doing either one, where you're like the second in charge, or like right one step below. Either one's fine with me. I'm perfectly happy. But you just take whatever opportunities come to you. So sometimes you want to run a show, or you have to run a show because there's no other work out there. And sometimes you do whatever, you can get. Which,
I mean, you make it sound so blasé, but, because you're like, well, you do whatever work you can get, run a show, co-run a show. But it's like, no, people don't get offered those opportunities unless.
Yeah, I wouldn't. No one ever says no to run a show. Right. And you get it doesn't come on. We've run 3. It doesn't happen that many times where you get to. Right. Only a handful of writers are really that. Like Aaron Sorkin, he does whatever he wants.
Right. No, there's a lot of people. So okay, and man, yeah, because the list of shows you worked on, man, really impressive. These are. Like I tried to, how do I say this? Put you in a box. It was very hard to do.
Oh, because
while there is okay, there's that comedy kind of through line. You can't compare, let's say, King of the Hill to Wilfred. Or Rules of Engagement. Well, okay, maybe a little bit like Just Shoot Me. Maybe a little similarity in a couple things, but there's a wide gambit of styles and shooting and technique. I mean. Is there something that draws you to each one of these, or is it just, hey, there's an opportunity to write on this show and you just go do it?
Follow the money. If you know story, you can work story structure, you can work on anything. And then your other job as a writer is to be able to pick up the voice of the show. And that's what you have to do. So some people say like, wow, yeah, you've done King of the Hill, but you've also done, Rules of Engagement, which are so different. That's just all part of the job. I don't see it as very different at all.
It's just writing.
I'm a comedy writer. So I'll write whatever you need.
Yeah. Okay. Question. Do writers take it extremely personal when shows get canceled, especially when they are phenomenal shows and are so well written, but for some reason the network goes a different way?
Yeah. I mean, I was on Out of Practice, which I thought was an excellent show. And that was run by Chris Lloyd and Joe Keenan. And Chris later created Modern Family, and Joe Keenan's a brilliant writer. And so the writing staff on that was like, it was kind of the dream team. It was like when we got chosen to be on that show, I was like, damn, they want us because they're so good. And the show got canceled. It comes down to numbers. It's usually about ratings usually. And if the ratings aren't quite high enough, I still think they shouldn't have canceled that show, but I don't take it personally. It's like, oh, well, you clear out your desk and you try to find another job. What are you going to do? You move on to the next thing.
Yeah, you can't. It's not like you have that much say over it. I've seen. I mean, and you see certain. I don't know. I have someone in mind, but I'm not going to pick on them. But you see certain talent, certain people that if a show's on the verge or it's 50-50 and like they start these like letter writing campaigns and these Facebook whatever you call them, the write-ins and whatnots. in your opinion, is it even worth it? I mean, is it really? Have you seen it change?
I haven't been on a show where like a campaign has saved the show. I've been on a show where campaigns have killed us. People complaining about us take us off the air. Thanks, asshole. But I haven't been in one where they actually saved us.
Interesting. Yeah, Leon in the chat says, yeah, that's what they did for Manifest. Like when Manifest went off the air, and then I think it got picked up by Netflix or whatever it was. Yeah, that's good insight. So as I was reading through your little thing here, you worked on Beavis and Butthead in 2011. So this is late Beavis and Butthead or re-brought back for the second time. Obviously, Beavis or King of the Hill is an offshoot. It's a cousin of Beavis and Butthead. So is it weird kind of working in reverse where like you were on King of the Hill and then going to Beavis and Butthead, like knowing that they're kind of related? Obviously, Mike Judge, those are both his shows, but not really. It was like, we knew Mike from King of the Hill, and then we had this opportunity to do Beavis and Butthead. And that was more like, those were like a few freelance episodes. They didn't really have a staff on that show. Our friends were the showrunners of it, but it was just them and two guys. And they said, hey, you want to write some episodes? And we're like, sure. I mean, the money was terrible, but it was Beavis and Butthead. So we're like, yeah, we'll do it. It's iconic,
for a schedule, because it's like, you got to say yes to Beavis and Butthead. And then we just wrote a few, and then we went into the booth with Mike and we watched. It's exactly what you'd think. We have a laptop and we're watching some terrible music videos and we're just pitching jokes as Beavis and Butthead. And then Mike would go, he'd nod, and then he'd go into the booth and do the voice.
Yeah, I can't imagine that's got to be. I can't imagine what that experience would be like.
It was silly.
You also worked on Brickleberry, which I really enjoyed it. For those that don't, I don't know, the Comedy Central, there's one I think Daniel Tosh was involved, or he was a producer or whatever, and did the voices and or one of the voices. It was such a great show. I think it ran for 2 seasons, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was that one that you really, because that seemed like such a, it makes sense now I'm thinking about it. Like it seemed like almost like a Beavis and Butthead in that it was kind of the raunchy comedy, a little off the wall, a little out there. Were you surprised that it didn't, kind of garner more seasons?
I'm trying to remember if we did 1 season or 2 on that. I don't remember. And it's because I think what happened was we did 1 season, and then the shows take a long time before they get picked up because it's animation. And so I think what happened was we just left for another job. And then when it came back, we weren't available. I think that's what happened. Unless someone says, no, you did 2 seasons. Then I'm like, okay, I don't remember right. But
a quick Google search says 3 seasons.
No, but I didn't work.
But you didn't work on it. Right. Gotcha.
So, because or else if I were to stay on it, it means like I would have to be unemployed for like a year and a half or something. So we just have to be on.
Yeah, I that's a thought I've never had is because of the cycle of animation and the time between, if you're not writing, for the next season, I guess, then there's that.
Well, they're not going to pick up the next season because they're going to wait until it airs to see if people want to watch it. And by that point, you're easily 9 months down the road. So
it's a great point, man. I learned something every time I do an interview. I learn something new. That's awesome. So okay, fast forward. Tacoma FD. I mean, how'd you get involved with these guys? What's that experience been like for you?
So those guys, they're 2 of the members from Broken Lizard, which is a comedy. They did Super Troopers. They did a bunch of movies. They just wrapped finishing movie just like I think today, and so they're terrific guys. We met because we had the same managers, and so they had this show. And to be honest, we had a similar idea for a show, and we go into the meeting. We go, hey. We have a similar idea. Here are all the scripts, or not the scripts, but here are the ideas. If you they're yours, as you beat us to the punch. And they're like, hey, well, why don't you come work for us? And they're just such sweet, great guys. And it really helps to have the actors in the room because the stars are, they're also the showrunners. And so you'll pitch an idea and they don't want to do that, or they you hear it come out of their mouth, and then it's just so much easier to have. For them to be the same person, the actors being in the showrunner. So they're a pleasure to work with. So, yeah.
Oh, I got to imagine that such a, I mean, the two guys, they're such a great comedy duo, and really everybody on that show is so good that does writing comedy for a firehouse, does that come easily for you? Again, is it just story is story, or is it a little more situational?
It's a story, but you want to make them a little specific to those guys. They what they tend to do is they come in with ideas at the beginning of each season, like this is we want to do a show about this or about, and so it's my partner and I's kind of at our level is our function is to say, okay, how do we turn that little idea? How do we turn that into something that feels like a story? And that's where that's our experience. That's our expertise, is like turning, just a kernel of an idea and how we break it up into acts and make it feel like a compelling story.
Oh, man. Yeah. That's gotta be fun. Certain shows, it just seems like a really fun environment to work. And they're
really laid back and they're just a pleasure. You can tell from watching it. It's like, it's casual. It's fun.
Yeah. A lot of a lot of positive comments. A couple I'll ignore.
Okay.
People talking about, okay, so like Hank Hill's Tool Shed, I mean, from I think that's a Beavis and Butthead thing that they did some inappropriate things in Hank's Tool Shed, but that's old news.
Sure they did.
That's kind of their thing. Okay, so I'm curious, as somebody who's been in the business for a long time, and as somebody is currently teaching, which we're going to talk about too, about the online courses that you provide and the different things. For you, what in your experience has been the biggest misconception for what you do as a TV writer, as a showrunner? What is the general misconception?
I think some people are surprised to learn that, like when I was on King of the Hill, they'd say, okay, which character do you write for? I was like, I write for all the characters, so I used to say Ladybird. Everything Ladybird says comes out of my mouth. But no, when you write an episode, you got to take the whole idea and you turn it. You write all the characters and you put it into a story. Some people think that, okay, so what does the network hand you ideas? Like, if they did, they would be writers. Like they're not. That's not. They can't do that. That's why they need us. We're the ones, we hand them ideas.
Yeah, they just shoot them down, right? Like that's their job.
For the most part, they don't even do that. They just sometimes they give you notes like, what are you going for? I don't quite understand this, and then you kind of adjust. Sometimes they'll shoot down, but not often.
Okay. So you've done a lot. You've done a lot. I scrolled through the whole page. Ooh. I'm curious because for us laymen, you start to see like producer, executive producer, consulting producer, supervising producer. Like, what's the difference? Can you explain it?
Yeah. So you got a staff of writers, and that's called the writing staff. Now the lowest level writer is called a staff writer, and they usually have a credit at the end. And then if you get a bump, the next year or whatever, you become a story editor, then executive story editor, co-producer, producer, supervising producer, co-executive producer, executive producer. Executive producer is usually the showrunner, the boss. And so there's just different levels of pay grade, basically.
Are they? I mean, I'm gonna imagine there's different levels of responsibility too, though, or is it just
Not
seniority?
Really. It's mostly seniority, and it's mostly like if the executive producer leaves the room then usually the co-exec will run the room, which is a big responsibility, knowing how to run a TV room. But everyone else usually is just, you're basically all on the same level. The only difference is, if you're smart, you'll realize if you're a low-level writer, you'll probably defer to someone with more experience instead of dig your heels in. And it's not because the person with more experience is like, hey, bow to me. I know. It's like, well, that's your experience. You learn stuff with experience. So, that's kind of how that happens.
Yeah, I'm equating that to my military service, and I'm thinking like almost like you would have, a squad, and where the difference is kind of just how the seniority, how long you've been there. We're all trained. We all start at that basic, and then just people kind of staffs, sergeant, staff sergeant, and it's just as you put in that time, you're now leading those kind of beneath you and kind of leading the way. So makes sense. Yeah. Makes sense when you break it down like that. I like it.
Difference in the military, you can't argue. I mean, you take orders. You can't argue with someone more senior, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's there's those people that try. It doesn't usually end well for them, but for the most part. Okay, from the audience, can you give some advice to someone wanting to get into the business? What is your kernel of wisdom that you can pass on, or something definitely not to do?
Okay, well, so here's the thing. If this person's on social media, obviously they are. Like I post daily tips on social media at Michael Jamin Writer. Every day I post a different, sometimes it's about writing, sometimes about how to break into the business as a writer, director, actor. Sometimes I talk about like how much money these people get made. And so my advice is just follow me there and take notes, watch all my posts and if you're serious about it, take notes, because what resonates from you, like today, in a month from now, you go, oh, now I get it. So, that's my advice. Like, I don't have one single advice. Like, that's what I talk about every day. And I started doing this maybe about 6 months ago, just posting 3-minute videos a day. So go get it. It's all yours.
That's actually how I came across you. I thought it was actually on TikTok, and I was fascinated by the tidbits behind the scenes, the writing process you were talking about. And I know you also do the podcast. Which,
yeah, we started a podcast.
And again, we talked about the name of it. I absolutely love the name of it, which was, hold on, I wrote it down somewhere.
It's okay. It's called Screenwriters Need to Hear This.
Screenwriters Need to Hear This. Oh, I love that name.
This is what you need to hear. Yes. You don't want to hear any of it.
Oh man, that's such a good name. So tell me a bit. What's the idea behind it? What made you go like, okay, I'm going to do this podcast, and this is why?
Honestly, it all started at the beginning of the pandemic because Hollywood shut down for 6 months. Like I had nothing. No one had anything going on. We weren't doing shows on Zoom, on Skype or whatever. Zoom, no, yeah, whatever it's called. We weren't doing any of those shows, and so I had a friend who was an aspiring screenwriter. He's like, hey, you should start a course. And I'm like, I don't really have the time or desire. But when the pandemic hit, I had nothing but time, and so I started putting that together. Then the podcast and posting daily kind of was like an outshoot. It was like, I needed, for a project I'm doing, I needed to build a social media following for like a pet project I'm doing. And so the best way to do that is just give away everything you have. Just give it away and people will show up. And so that's why, and it's not a big deal for me to post every day, once a day for 2 or 3 minutes, and I put it up on the internet. And so that's how that came about. So go get it. All you got to do is follow it, and you can always unfollow.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm not just saying it because you're on, because I followed it well before I invited you to the show, and because I'm like I said at the beginning, I'm so fascinated by that, the inner workings and all the ins and outs. I have friends who are trying to write for theater and trying to write for TV, and I have friends who are doing background extra work and trying to get into that or story writing or writing books. So I know a few people where I sent them, I was like, oh, you got to watch this clip. There's a lot of good information back there. So you're providing, really great information. I know one of them was talking about the difference between agents and managers, how to find someone to represent you and all these different things. Which already people are like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to follow this guy. So
it's all free, dude. Go get it.
Yep, exactly. So one more question I wanted to ask about the title showrunner. You hear that so much, but that's not exactly an official title in the sense of. So what is, when you hear showrunner? What does that mean? To let people know, what does that mean when you're a showrunner?
So the showrunner is sometimes the creator of the show, sometimes not. The showrunner is the head writer, basically, but it's more than the head writer. The showrunner is responsible for all the creative decisions on the show. They may delegate some of those decisions, but at the end of the day, it's their vision, right? And in film, the director's in charge. It's like, that's why it says a film by. The writers sometimes not even invited to the set. Who cares about the writers? Sometimes they got a million. Like the writers treated like, except for the money, the writers treated like crap. But in TV, the writer's the boss, and the director works for the showrunner. And so, whatever, you watch a show has 13 episodes, you might see 13 different directors. So obviously, the director couldn't possibly be the boss. They're just there for a week. It's the showrunner's always there. And so when I say creative decisions, you're talking about what stories to tell, how to tell those stories, hair, makeup, wardrobe, sets, locations, where we're going to spend the money, stuff like that. That's all the showrunner makes all those decisions. It's a lot to do.
Yeah, it's huge. And you hit on something that I've always been confused, because like you said, a movie is directed by, it's a film by, they're the guy, they're in charge, they make all the shots. And then, so like I think of someone like Kevin Smith, right? He makes his movies, it's all him. That's all his, and except the one off studio movies that he did. But then you hear, oh, Kevin Smith's going to direct this episode of Supergirl. And it's like, but that doesn't make sense. How does it, like, what is if a director makes all the decisions on a film set and then he just comes in and do one episode, like, what is he really doing on that episode, really?
Well, and like you'd watch that episode of Supergirl. I don't know if you did that, but it's not like you'd watch it go, oh, I can tell this is a Kevin Smith. Like you'd think it would look different, or it would be talky, or more like people would be smoking weed or whatever. Like there's none of that, right? So he's just there doing basically a day job, and he's making creative decisions, but they all have to be approved by the showrunner, and that's how you get a homogenous show. That's why you watch Supergirl and you go, "Oh, I love Supergirl. I always like all the episodes." It's not like you're like, it shouldn't feel like it's one director did this one and one director did that one. It should all kind of feel like this is my favorite show.
Right.
And
right.
So, yeah.
I think. Sorry. Go ahead. No.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I think of like and like there's like those anthology shows where like the whole point is every episode is a different creative team, so they all, like, it might be one story, but I was thinking of like I think The Matrix did it that one time, like they had like a bunch of different shorts and they were all different teams, so it's all the same story but different, very different look.
Even Black Mirror, which is an anthology show, that Charlie Brooker, he's the showrunner. He decided, that's why every episode kind of has the same feel, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not like, so what, you're going to watch some kind of crazy, dark, dystopian science fiction. That's what it's going to be. Yeah.
I mean, it's like a modern day Twilight Zone. I love that. It's a great show. But yeah, that's an excellent point. I like that. Okay, so oh my God, we're coming up on time. I have so many other questions. Tell me a little bit about the online course you provide. Like, why is, like, and I've looked into it. I know how amazing it is, but let the people know at home.
Yeah, again, so I started that only because I had a friend pressure me to do it, and he's actually the co-host of my podcast. He was like, because I remember talking to him. He was an aspiring screenwriter. He went to film school. And he wanted to know about story. And I kind of told him, and he was like, yeah, I didn't learn any of this in film school. How do I not know? I'm like, I don't know. I didn't go to film school either. I learned this on the job, basically working for writers who are, more senior and more talented than I am. And so I run the course is basically as if you were sitting in a writer's room with me. Like, okay, I'm going to show you how to take a kernel of an idea, and we're going to decide whether it's a good one or a bad one. And then if it's a good one, I'm going to show you how we break it into 3-act structure, how we turn that idea, how we turn it into a beat sheet, into an outline, to a first draft and a second draft, literally how we turn it into television. So it's not theory. It's like, it's this is what we do. Yeah. This is because we don't have time for theory in TV. You got to do an episode every week. Like, when people start talking theory in a writer's room, I'm like, you need to get out of here because I got a job to do.
Right. And then for again, I read into this stuff and you hear, when you do a movie, it's 6, 7, 8 months, and it's a shot a day, but when you're doing TV, it's like they're cranking these things out as fast as humanly possible. In your opinion, I'm curious, is that fair? Should there be more time given to TV, or should movies be made faster? I mean,
we ran a show called Maron in IFC, and that. We had 3 days to shoot one episode, which is really fast. Like 5 would be short, 3 is fast. It was like, if your thumb is not in the shot, if the cameraman is steady, move on to the next one. And when the critics watched it, no one said, oh, the show is like, it's too fast. It wasn't framed perfectly. Because there are shows that you see on big network shows that are beautifully lit and framed. So what? They're boring. They're terrible. But this show was dirty and gritty because we had to shoot it fast. And people like the writing, and the acting. So if they, who cares if it's a dirty, if the camera slipped a little bit, no o's going to call me out on that.
It's like a guerrilla style shooting, right?
It was fast. And, I liked it.
Oh man.
Let me tell you something, being on set people think it's fun. It's in my opinion, it's one of the most boring things you can do because it's mostly just people setting up cameras and you're just sitting there. You're just waiting hour for a shot, and a shot can take 30-second shot, which takes all day to shoot. I mean, like, it's really boring.
So the best part of your job. All right. So we know being on set is the worst. What's the best part?
If it's fast, you're like, okay, this is good. But if you're doing one of these, like, I don't know, if you're doing a show, it takes. Sometimes I'll watch a show and I go, oh, that shot. I know that shot took 3 hours to set up.
Everything's perfectly placed, right? Like, or especially like I think of like the superhero shows where they have to do that quick change where they do their swoosh in and out, and it's like. That's two totally different shots for basically what is 1 or 2 seconds of screen time, and that's double the work.
That's why I'm a writer. I'm not a director. That's why I became a writer. So
all right. Given you obviously you've dabbled in a bit of the superhero with Lois and Clark and the different shows. I'm curious because I hear often that we're reaching a saturation point, right? That there's this like superhero, same thing that it was with zombies for a while, and then it was with the vampires, and now it's superheroes. Do you see on the cusp of Spider-Man coming out in 48 hours? Do you see superhero fatigue on the horizon?
As a matter of fact, I do. I remember in the 90s, and I was running a Just Shoot Me. NBC had this thing, Must See TV, and they picked up, I don't know, it was like some crazy amount of sitcoms that year. They had so many sitcoms because they were working, and so when something works, let's just do 100 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one of the writers on the show saying, "Oh, this is bad news for sitcoms because they picked up so many." She's like, "This is going to kill sitcoms," and that's kind of what happened. It oversaturated, and I think that's what's happening with these, especially these Marvel movies. It's like it's not special when there's a new one every 10 minutes. It's just not special.
Mm. And I do agree. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge nerd, a fan of them. But when you're constantly having to raise the stakes, right? Every movie is the end of the world, and then it's the end of the solar system, then the galaxy, and then the universe. Like, the Fast and the Furious franchise, they sent a car to space. The last one, they were driving a car in space.
Right? Because what are you going to do? How do you top it?
I mean, you're the writer. How do you top it when everything is end of the world? What how do you top that?
Right. I mean, we're conscious when we're writing a show not to go too big too fast, because if you get too big, how do you top it? How do you that's when shows jump the shark, when you start getting too big. So you always kind of, as a showrunner, your job is kind of to rein in the writers, because sometimes a writer will pitch something, everyone will laugh and get very excited about it, and you're like, whoa, guys, let's not kill the show yet.
Yeah, you can't paint yourself into the corner. The last one I'll say, like, I was a huge fan of Dexter. I love Dexter, and every season built and built and built, and then it was like, I think it was after the 4th season, and then it was like, oh my god, it was so good, and then it's like, where do you go from here? And then it seemed.
Especially those drama shows, I'm in awe of them when they can. Breaking Bad, the fact that every season was amazing. Like, don't ask me how they did it. It was really good.
You got to sell that course, man. How to keep writing drama better and better every year. All right. Well, we're getting to the end of it, and I wanted to give you an opportunity. Talk about anything that you have coming up that you'd like to promote. Where can people follow you and support you? All that stuff.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to take the course, it's at michaeljamin.com/course. You can find it there, michaeljamin.com. If anybody wants to just learn on social media, I post at Michael Jamin Writer. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. And my screenwriting podcast called Screenwriters Need to Hear This. All is just, if you're, and if I would recommend, if you're on, follow me everywhere, because I have different stuff that I put everywhere. So I don't necessarily put the same stuff on, because some platforms aren't really right for whatever the format. So if you want to follow me everywhere, go get it. If you have it, if not, just follow me Instagram, whatever is easier for you. And I try to post. I got a small team doing this. I just come up with the content and then they help distribute it. So
and by the way, they're doing a bang up job. Whoever they are out there, they're doing a great job.
Better, actually. I just approved some stuff. I was like, hey, this is starting to look good.
Yeah, so. It really is quality material, and I can second, having seen it, that because us low level people, probably put the same content on every medium because it's just easier that way. But you really do put good content out across.
It just depends. I'm always trying to experiment. Like I'm trying to experiment with stuff that I don't know what people resonate with. I'm just curious. I'm as curious about this as you are. I was a very private person until I started doing this, and then suddenly I'm on social media. And it was a little uncomfortable at first because that's not really my nature, but it is now.
I get it. I totally get it. And any shows, anything you're excited about, anything you want to talk about or you can talk about so far?
Well, there's Tacoma FD. We go back in January. My partner and I we sold 2 animated shows. And the thing about we sold them because in COVID they're easier to produce, and we're happy to do them. We're writing the pilots now, so I can't say, well, it'll be on the air whenever. We're still writing. We're still in the writing process. So,
right. Okay.
Hopefully I'll have news about that soon.
Well, we'll definitely keep an eye out. You are forever a friend of the show. Anytime you want to come back, promote anything,
for sure.
We'd love to have you, or we could dissect some TV scripts and talk business. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, it was a pleasure for me. So thank you for having me. It was wonderful.
Awesome. All right, guys, we're gonna go to a short break. We'll be back with more show right after this. Hang tight, and we'll see you guys at the break.